All right, we're back. Another upload. Our upload schedule's on fire, and we're coming back with our season predictions, just like last year. Patrick, what's up?
Going on, man. My favorite video of the year, I think. So,
Yeah, our season predictions were fire, and these will be fire. These will be our catalogs for each season. But to stay in line with our new branding of this new podcast, we're going to incorporate what we were doing with the players, the top 60 players, but just incorporate it with our standings predictions. We'll go over each of our separate ones, but we're going to do a little draft format for as a collaborative team to decide what the standings are going to look like, East and West. So where do you want to go first, Patrick? East or West?
I figure we'll start with the East.
Yeah,
Probably
we live in
makes
the
the most
East.
sense. And also, I think the West is a lot more, not necessarily intriguing, but I think there's a lot more talking points in the West personally. So I think it's better to start with the East.
No, it's a good point. Okay, well, you started first on our last draft, so I'll start first in the East. You're gonna end up starting first in the West. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, starting the N.B.A. podcast, standings predictions draft. My first pick in the East. We've been talking about them a lot. I've been high on them. I know I shouldn't be, but I'm going to pick the 76ers. Now, this is standings, so it's mostly regular season we're taking into account here. I just think with how deep they are, how good Joel Embiid and Harden are together, just all around, I just think the Sixers are going to win a boatload of games regardless of their playoff success.
Yeah. So on my end, I didn't have them first, but I am also very high on them. And one of the things that really stood out to me when I was looking at the standings last year, they were only 2 games back of that first seed. Now, of course, the Bucks and the Celtics were both tied with them as well, so that's 3 teams within 2 games of the top, who were the Miami Heat. But they were 2 games back, and they had so many things go wrong for them last year between like the whole Ben Simmons situation. James Harden only came in halfway through the season, and of course, the whole thing about him being tremendously out of shape. So I think there's a lot of intrigue there. I think they're only going to get better because they're mostly a young team. Like Tyrese Maxey is only going to improve. Thibault may improve some on the offensive end. And then, of course, you mentioned they're a lot deeper this year. PJ Tucker, Danuel House are 2 great additions. So DeAnthony Melton as well at the guard position, I think is going to be a big add. So I think they're a deeper team. So I have no complaints with them this high up.
It's actually a good point what you made, because like I've made the point too when we've talked about the Heat. I know. But how they were first seed with only 53 wins last year. The East was so tough last year, and it's going to be even tougher this year. So yeah, with their added depth and hopefully the health to their main players, they could easily get first. So who's your second? Who's the second pick then?
I'm going to go with the team I think is the best in the East. I'm a little bit unsure about this because I think there's a good chance, a lot of their star players get rested during the regular season, but I'm going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks. Pretty straightforward. They've been a top seed in the East now for multiple years. They have the best player in the league in Giannis. They have a great supporting cast. They didn't necessarily make a ton of moves this offseason at all. Really just kind of brought back a few players and shored up a few third string positions and stuff like that, but they still have an incredible core of Drew Holiday, Middleton, Giannis. Hopefully, a big part of their maybe moving from the 3 seed to the 1 seed is going to be Brooke Lopez being healthy. I think that's a huge part of their team. He missed. Yeah, literally huge. He missed a lot of games though last season, so hopefully he'll stay healthy. I think it will also help they have more insurance this year. Last year it was Bobby Portis was pretty much their only big man backup. They have Serge Ibaka now permanently, which is good for them. He's going to be there the whole season. Of course, his injury status is always up in the air too, but still good depth. Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton. Hopefully, Jordan Nwora takes a step this year, and they could also look to add some pieces via trade. So I'm pretty confident in the Bucks being around the top, and I'm most confident in them over the other teams. So I've got them as the number 2 in this draft.
Yeah, no quarrels. The only reason I didn't have him as one of my top 2, and we'll get to that later, it's just their depth, while they did like shore up around the edges and stuff, and very good point about Brooke Lopez starting the year injured last year. I am just a little worried about like how old they are for the regular season win side of things. So yeah, that's why they weren't necessarily one of my top, but they're in the top tier, obviously. So my number three, I'm pretty sure we're 3 for 3 in the top three here, unless your Heat fandom has gone out of control. But I have the Celtics. What
Yeah.
were the Heat there, or was the Celtics?
No, it's the Celtics.
Okay. So I know the coach thing is wild. Like that has to mean something, right? You lose your coach, who was a very good coach of the year candidate last year. And I don't want to overrate preseason, but watching them twice against the Hornets and then watching them a couple other times, it's just like they still look great. They still look like the defending champs. And they got Malcolm Brogdon off the bench, which he's another injury question, but I mean, if he could stay healthy, that's a crazy piece to be coming off of the bench for an already deep team. So I think they're going to roll this year. They could even be one. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where I was pretty much almost, it wasn't necessarily a given, but they were definitely my number one team, and the whole coach situation made them drop just a little bit for me.
Right.
The one thing that worries me a little bit with this team is health, like you mentioned with Brogdon, but also, Al Horford's getting older. Robert Williams is unfortunately having a history of injuries with such a young career. Of course, the Gallinari addition is basically a subtraction already, which is really unfortunate for Don Corleone. But he'll be missing the entire season, unfortunately. Which he was going to be a really nice piece, somebody different to bring off their bench. Maybe less of a defender but more of a scorer. They did add Blake Griffin. I don't really know the effectiveness of that add. I think it's just a good kind of depth third string guy behind Williams, Horford.
It's just like we lost Gallinari, so let's get an okay third string power forward to come off the bench.
Yeah, they did add Justin Jackson, who I've always been kind of a fan of. Not sure how much he's really going to contribute, but the main thing is Marcus Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Robert Williams, if healthy, Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, when it comes down to 7 players, Grant Williams, if you want to throw in an eighth, that's one of the better eights in the NBA, just in terms of quality and players who are always going to contribute on both ends of the floor. So I think for that reason, that's why their floor is top 3, in my opinion. I just think their ceiling is a little bit lower because of the Ime Udoka situation. So that's why, I had the Bucks above them.
All fair points. And this is where it gets a little interesting to see if your Heat fandom really does shine through here. Who is your number 4th? I'm curious.
You pretty much have it spot on. It's going to be the Heat here. Of course, they were the number 1 seed last year, only by 2 games, but they did play very well. I think I expect them to regress a little bit just because I think they were very much a regular season. They just showed up very much last year. I think it was their goal to have home court throughout the playoffs, and it nearly paid off for them. In terms of subtractions, I mean, the main one is PJ Tucker's not at the 4, and there are some question marks there, whether they decide to go big, maybe like Adebayo playing some 4 with Yurt 7 or Deadman at the 5. That's the question. I think it's more likely Caleb Martin gets some 4 minutes. I think Haywood Highsmith, a young player who could get some minutes too. But that's pretty much the only piece they lost. And one of the main additions they get is they'll have Victor Oladipo the whole year, which I think is a big piece for them. Somebody who, honestly, I could see starting at the 2 if they still want to keep Tyler Hero off the bench. Of course, Tyler Hero is a huge part of this team. He got paid. I think that's a big discussion point. How does it affect him? I tend to think he's going to improve because he's a young player and is going to improve every offseason. But sometimes, the money can go to people's heads. But I think Hero will be fine.
But I mean, look at Ayton, though. Last year for y'all with Ayton, they didn't give him the contract, which, by the way, that contract is cheaper than what Hero got. And look at the fiasco that ensued. So maybe that's like part of the value in what some people think an overpaying Hero is, like keeping him happy and making sure he's playing at that same level, if not better.
Yeah, I think a big part of it as well is, is this contract going to mean it's his turn in the starting lineup, or is their strategy still to use him as the sixth man per se? Although he plays more minutes than a lot of the starters, so it's an interesting point. I mean, they still have depth: Kyle Lowry, Gabe Vincent, Tyler Hero, Oladipo, Butler, Struess, Duncan Robinson, if he can remember how to play basketball, could be interesting. Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith. I do like Nikola Jovic, but I'm not sure how much he's going to contribute as a 19-year-old in the basketball world. And then Bam, Yurtseven, Deadman. They have a lot of depth, particularly. I'm not necessarily saying that their top eight is as good as the Celtics' top eight, but they have pieces behind that in case of injuries. Obviously, a big part of this team is Jimmy Butler, but during the regular season, I think they can survive with him taking good days off and all that. I just think it's another thing. It's one of those things. Their floor, I think, is 5 at worst. And I just have a lot of trust, especially in Eric Spoelstra as a coach, to keep them in the top 4 in the East and have that home court in round 1.
Would I be surprised if that were the case? Absolutely not. I can definitely see them being up in the upper echelon of the East again. They were just a little lower on my list, and we've talked plenty of why. But you did convince me to be higher on them than I was. Speaking of people I'm higher on, what? Tell me if I'm going too crazy here, because my next pick is the Toronto Raptors, and by the too crazy part, I had them one spot ahead of the Heat on my list. So what do you think of Raptors at 5?
I don't have a problem with it because I have them at 6.
Okay. Well, yeah, Raptors. We've talked about some of their players here and there. Not as much of a full breakdown in the NBA podcast yet, but we're both huge Scotty Barnes fans, and I just always love teams that play with a bunch of wings, but the Raptors are like wings on steroids because their wings are playmaking, defending the rim, etc. Like, the depth is kind of an issue. Can they get like one more guy besides Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent that could truly make an impact on the perimeter? I really like the pickup of Otto Porter just to add to all those wings, like just playing their own brand of basketball. Like they've mastered this positionless basketball. And as a result, I just think their defense is going to be so good because of how switchable it is and just how many great defenders they have. I'm just a huge fan of everyone on their team, have been for years. I just have a lot of faith in them. That's why in the end, I didn't think I would have them so high in my standings, but I just did. So yeah.
Yeah, you look at it. This is a team that won 48 games last year. We're the 5 seed, and a lot of their competitors and like the Bulls and the Nets, I just have question marks about. So that's why I had them at 6. I mean, really, when you look at it, they've improved on last year's team. I think it's pretty easy to say that with Otto Porter coming back. Otto Porter getting signed. Thaddeus Young is back permanently after the trade to the Raptors, so I think that's a nice piece to have off their bench as well. And then, of course, all these young guys on their team: OG, Scotty Barnes, Fred VanVleet is still somewhat young, Gary Trent Jr. is still somewhat young, Precious Achua is still young.
Do you see all the threes he's making in preseason? Like, I know it's preseason, but gosh darn it, man.
It's going to be a nice piece for them if he can do that. Of course, the big question mark, I think, in their starting lineup is at center. Kind of what you see a lot of last year is Pascal at the 5, which is a little bit undersized. But with all the wings they have, it's not necessarily a concern. I do really like the pick of Christian Colo-Colo, or Coloco, or however you say his name, 7'1" center from Arizona. Mm-hmm. If he develops, which I mean, he's so raw, but he's got so much athleticism, he could be an interesting piece for them. And then, of course, what you mentioned, the big question I have is, why they didn't bring in another point guard to kind of back up Fred VanVleet. I'm not necessarily saying you need to have an amazing backup point guard or something, like a Pat Bev situation, a guy that's really, really good off the bench, but probably should be starting. But you need to have somebody who can actually contribute and can ball handle and run an offense. I know their strategy is Pascal as a point forward or Scotty Barnes as a point forward, but I just prefer for them to have somebody better than Malachi Flynn off the bench. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a question mark there, but at the same time, they succeeded last year with the same circumstances. So, I mean, I just don't see a reason. It's another thing, the way their defense plays, and once again, coaching is so important. Nick Nurse is a fantastic coach. I just feel like, again, I've mentioned it a few times, I feel like their floor is like the 6th or the 7th spot, and I just had more confidence in them than some of the other teams I have below them.
I find it interesting because before we started the show, you linked me your over and under list for this year. I find it interesting that you didn't lock them for an over because their over under is 46.5. They won 48 last year. I know some of the other teams at the top got better, but I also think a lot of teams below them, besides like the Cavs and the Hawks, maybe got worse. And I think we could see a decent amount of improvement from where they were last year. So, what are you thinking there? Just not enough spots?
Kind of. It was one of those things, I think some of the teams at the top got better. I think the Sixers got better. I think the Celtics are going to be, not sure I'd necessarily say better, but I think the win totals are going to increase. I think the Sixers will be high 50s. I think the Celtics will be high 50s. I think the Bucks might hit 60. But I think there's going to be some more wins there. And then I also think some teams in the bottom short up a bit. I think the Magic are going to be a better team. I think the Pacers have a chance to be better. I think the Pistons are certainly going to be better. So I think it's just a matter of I think the better teams the teams above them got better, and I also think the teams below them got better. I also think the Raptors got better too. I just wasn't 100% sure about it. So that's why I went with that.
So basically, just all around talent's better. So those random Saturday night games, you don't think they could eke out as, I don't even think that's a word. They can't get as many wins from the Magic and the Pacers, or well, you're not really out on the Pacers, but Magic, Cavs, etc. Like they just won't be able to get as many easy wins, pretty much.
The other thing that concerns me is I think Fred VanVleet is somewhat injury prone, and it's one of those things where if he gets out for a long time, I think this team might struggle. So it's kind of a safer play, I guess. But
yeah, okay, that makes sense. So who'd you have 6 then?
Well, it's actually who I had 5 because I had the Raptors at 6.
Okay.
I am on the hype train, and I'm going to go with the Cleveland Cavaliers here.
Here we go.
Yeah, I just think it makes too much sense. This is a team, obviously, the big question mark is, well, the Nets beat them in the play-in, that sort of stuff. But at the same time, they were only 2 wins off of the 6th seed last year with the team they had, with it being Evan Mobley's first year. You talk about rookie walls and that kind of stuff. And I think really they've improved a ton. I mean, the main thing is Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, that's the big piece. But you look at it, they're going to have Ricky Rubio this entire year, assuming he can stay healthy, which is a big thing. Raul Neto is insurance, which as a third point guard, Raul Neto is absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's a pretty damn good piece. Obviously Mitchell's starting at the 2. They have Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro. Probably one of them will start at the 3 if I had to imagine, but there's a lot of options there with either offense or defense. Cedi Osman is pretty good. Dylan Windler is still only a second-year player, can provide some spacing. And then, of course, their bigs is really where they're strong. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley at the 3, at the 4, and the 5 is really good. Dean Wade is a solid enough rotation piece. Kevin Love, obviously, a contender for 6th man of the year last year. The question is, how effective can he be? Obviously, he's getting up there in years, but I still think he shined in his role last year, and I think he'll do good enough. And they had a depth too. Robin Lopez at the 5 is not a bad kind of second, third option. He'll provide some defense and some size. So I just think they're a deep team already. I think they improved. And of course, Donovan Mitchell is a huge addition. I mean, one of the better scoring guards in the league. The question, of course, is the fit next to Garland. I don't think that's really an issue in the regular season. I think it's more of a postseason issue when you get to the size of their guards and that kind of stuff. But I think regular season, they'll have no issues at all. And I really think it's going to be nice. The big question, I think, is spacing. But I think with Mitchell, I think Garland's going to improve as a shooter. And then, who they play at the 3. You might see some Osman at the 3 just because of his spacing ability, or LeVert over Okoro. But they have a lot of pieces, and I also think they're a team that's not going to be scared to add an additional piece if they need to. And, I think a big part of regular season NBA basketball is point guard play, and Garland and Rubio are 2 excellent orchestrators on the offensive end. So I think they're just going to be a very fun team to watch this year. And I really think them at the 5 is a good place for them. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they jumped the Heat at 4. But I just had a little bit more confidence in the Heat.
Agree with so many of your points. And to your point about the guard play being so important throughout the year, even Mitchell could be a pseudo point guard in some lineups if they're dealing with injury problems. They're stacked top to bottom. Like you said, the only problem is that like they're indecisive about who's going to be their 3. We all know that. Maybe they can upgrade to that position with a Kevin Love trade or something like that. But I feel like a lot of people, and I know a big concern is like how are Garland and Mitchell gonna mesh? And I get it, but me and you, we don't care about that as much because we believe in Garland's ability to adapt and Mitchell's and Donovan Mitchell was sitting here like leading some of the best teams. Granted, they didn't have as much playoff success, but some of the best regular seasons of the past few years. And you throw him onto a team with basically 3 all-stars. Because I know Mobley isn't an all-star, but we pretty much all called him one because he basically is. So you're right. I wouldn't be surprised if they were 4. They were 5 on my list. I wouldn't even be surprised if they were top 3. I'm really high on them as well. I'm super excited to watch them throughout the year, man. I really am. So with my number 7, it's actually my number 7 on my main list. I have the Nets. I told you on this podcast I was out on the Nets, and by out on the Nets I meant breathing their name in the same sentence as the Sixers, Bucks, Celtics, and Heat. But I still think obviously they have enough talent to make the playoffs. Play in. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Ben Simmons, KD, Kyrie. They could end up being in the lottery for all we know. But as they're constructed now, I feel pretty comfortable if they stay together, they'll be one spot below like Raptors and Cavs. I'm pretty sure you agree with me there.
They were my number 7 team, yeah. I
Okay.
will say I'm not 100% confident in the fact that they'll be below mainly the Raptors, but the Cavs. I'm not 100% confident in that fact because, I mean, this is a team that still has Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and
Fair.
Ben Simmons if he returns. There's a lot of talent, especially on the offensive end. It's just the defensive instability. I know it doesn't necessarily matter as much in the regular season, but it is a concern for me. And then also their lack of a really solid 5 is also an issue. You know, Claxton is the main guy, but Day'Ron Sharpe was obviously just a second-year player he was solid in his rookie year, but there's still questions. And then you're looking at Markieff Morris at the 5, which is obviously not ideal in NBA terms. So there's issues there in terms of guards and wings. I mean, they're pretty loaded there. Irving, Mills, Seth Curry, Joe Harris, Ben Simmons, Royce O'Neal, KD, TJ Warren, Kessler Edwards. You know, they've got plenty of depth there. They picked up Yuta Watanabe, or however you say his
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a solid enough piece for the Raptors last year. You know, he's solid depth. I just like to mention that. So, I mean, they have depth on the wings, but it's just one of those things. I think the Cavs are just constructed better as a roster, 1 to 5, and then bench. And then I think the Raptors, with their uniqueness, I just had a little bit more faith. And then also coaching. I love Steve Nash to death, obviously, but I don't have much faith in his coaching ability, certainly not on the same level as Nick Nurse and Eric Spoelstra. So I think that's just, for me, their ceiling, I think, is actually like 4th or 5th, but I think they just have a wider range of possibilities just in terms of standings. And I just feel like this is the best place for them underneath the Cavs and the Raptors and the Heat.
And I get it. Kevin Durant, Kyrie, Ben Simmons, the talent is tantalizing. Like you mentioned, they have got depth on guard and, more importantly, wing, which is what everyone cares about now. But I've heard so many people go like, well, no, I still have the Nets in my upper echelon. I have all these questions about the Cavs. I'm just so on the other side of the fence with that. Like, I would throw money down that the Cavs are going to be better than them this year. You have like hypothetical questions about the Cavs, but look at all these real questions about the Nets that have gone on. But I digress. We've talked about the Nets so much already on this pod. Who do you got for number 8? I'm going to assume a bird is involved.
You would be incorrect.
Ooh.
It was a tough thing for me because these next two teams, obviously the team I'm talking about is the Chicago Bulls here, and
Okay.
then the team with the bird, which I assume you're talking about the Atlanta Hawks. It was a close one for me. I just have a little bit more faith in the Bulls just because of some of their top end talent. I think they're more of a regular season made team, if that makes sense. They won 46 games last year. I think they probably would have won 50 or more games, health providing. Obviously, Lonzo Ball is a big issue. Supposed to miss a few months, according to the last report. I think it's one of those things where they may just play it safe with him and try and bring him back like a few weeks before the postseason and then before the playoffs, and then have him back for then. But I do think their roster is constructed a lot better than last year in terms of preparing for injuries. So of course Lonzo's going to be out. You have Kobe White, you have Goran Dragic at the point guard position. You have Caruso if you want to consider that path. I consider him more of like a wing or a two. But Kobe White and Dragic are two solid guards that can play that position. Caruso is a great defender. They added Dalen Terry, who was one of my favorite picks of the draft, another great defender. Javonte Green, Ayo Dosuma, Derek Jones Jr. is solid. Patrick Williams will be healthy all year, which I think is a huge thing for them. So they have, once again, loaded on the wings. Didn't even mention DeMar DeRozan, who's technically a wing. But, the thing I mentioned with the Bulls last year was the fact that they have a scorer at every level of the court. You have Vucevic inside, you have DeMar DeRozan, maybe the best mid-range shooter in the league, and then you have Levine from the perimeter. And I still think that holds. I think that's a very valuable trait. I think it's a thing that a lot of teams are lacking, to have three scorers at each, or have a score at each of the three levels of the court. And then also, I think it helps. I think they answered a big question mark in terms of backup center, bringing in Andre Drummond. I think that's a huge addition for them. Drummond is a guy who really excelled in that role for the Sixers. Didn't do necessarily as well with the Nets last year, but in terms of his backup role as a center, I think he's a great addition. I think he'll really help shore up some issues there. So, and then a main thing, like I mentioned before, I think Patrick Williams back really raises the ceiling for this team. I'm really high on him and his ability as a two-way wing, and I think having him all year will be huge for them. So I just have a little bit more faith in their just their whole depth than the Hawks, and that's why I picked them above the Hawks.
I actually disagree, but only by a bit, because they're like right next to each other on my list. I gotta say, before I even keep going, I freaking love Javonte Green, man. Like, I love Javonte Green so much. He was pretty close to getting in my top 10 on our favorite player rankings the other day, simply because I watched so many Bulls games last year, and the guy is just he's like Bruce Brown, where it's just there are these 6'5" dudes who are supposed to be guards, but they've embraced a role of like a power forward and are tough enough and smart enough to play that role. And he's looking like he's excelling the preseason. So I love Javonte Green. Had to give him a shout out. I know you're really high on Patrick Williams. I am too, but I'm a bit skeptical just because it's his third year, technically his second year, considering the injury that had him out most of last year. Like the Drummond pickup, like the Dragic pickup. Love Ayo Dosunmu. Love their guards, but they don't quite bring it on defense like Lonzo does. That Lonzo Caruso duo on defense was a big reason why they started the year off so good last year. And maybe Caruso by himself could fuel the defense, but I'm a bit skeptical. Still love DeRozan, still love Levine. Vooch, like you said, he could score at all levels, but his shooting has not really been there since his All-Star year in the Magic, and his rim protection has never really been there. So that's what scares me with them. And the Hawks, they do have. I guess I could just use this to transition into the Hawks because they were my next pick. They do have some of the problems I just laid out with the Bulls. That's why they're so close to me in the standings. But the top tier of Trey and DeJounte Murray, I'm actually pretty high on that working. Even though Trey is like such a ball dominant player, he's the one who chose Murray. I don't know if you know, like he was the one that requested they get him, so I feel like he would be willing to sacrifice. I like we both love their wings. Like Collins, who I mean, he's always on the trade block, but DeAndre Hunter, Justin Holiday is just that good, solid wing that everyone wants. We were talking about him a bit before the show. AJ Griffin is a rookie, so whatever. But then they got a center rotation of Clint Capella and Okwangwu, who I like a lot more to protect the rim and get rebounds than who the Bulls have. And then you got Bogdan as a good spark plug guard. So I don't know. Maybe it's just semantics. Maybe some people will think either of us are really wrong. I just like the Hawks a little bit more. That's all.
I don't think there's anything wrong with liking the Hawks. I just had a few more question marks about them because of the whole Young and DeJounte fit. I do think it is going to work out. I just think it might take some time, and that might give them a little bit of hit in the regular season. I really think, especially once you get to the playoffs, I think it's going to be an effective combination. There are a few question marks I have. DeAndre Hunter's health, I think, is a big part of this team. I do think they're better equipped than last year to handle it because I think Justin Holiday at the three is a better option than like Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot or somebody like that. Your point about John Collins on the trade block, I get that, and also injuries kind of worry me there. The one thing I will say is I heard from Shams today that the Hawks are committed to their core of Murray, Young, and Collins, which is a very interesting thing. I haven't heard those three necessarily mentioned with Collins in the mix. Obviously, Kent Capella is still here. He's pretty much a given. He's going to get you 12 rebounds to 15 rebounds a night. He's going to have a few blocks. He's going to play excellent rim defense. Of course, you can't forget to mention that Frank Kaminsky is on this team, one of your favorite players. I actually, all jokes aside, I do think it's an interesting ad for them because he's going to give them something at the five that Capella and Okongwu do not give, and that's really offense and something else.
I thought you were about to say no rim protection, but go on.
Well, that's also a fitting thing. Obviously, the defensive end is questionable. But with that being said, I do think that he can be a valuable player for them, especially in the regular season. I mean, there were a couple games for the Suns last year where Kaminsky was one of our best players. So I think as a third center, he's perfectly fine in that role, and he might contribute a little bit. I also have some questions on the wings. I think Holiday and Hunter are good, but like AJ Griffin is obviously a rookie. Jalen Johnson, I really want to see him play a little bit more because I think he's got a lot of intrigue, but there are some questions. And then after that, you're looking at Jared Culver. I mean, maybe you could consider Bogdan a wing, but I really don't. And then, DeJounte, obviously, maybe. I just like the Bull. I'm a big wing guy, as I think everybody knows already. And I just like the Bulls' wings a little bit better, and that contributed to this decision. So.
No, I like what you said about Jalen Johnson, by the way, because he was like such a highly rated prospect for a lot of people. So I don't know, maybe I'm not saying he's gonna have like some great year or something, but maybe he could give him a little something. Whereas people are expecting him not to give him like all too much. One last thing I want to say on the Hawks is they have a similar advantage to the Timberwolves. I've noticed from looking over their roster is they could kind of configure their lineups to just like. Where their starting lineup is like, yeah, okay, these are our best five guys, but it's not like the most seamless fit. But as the game goes along, we could have pieces that replace what some of the best players in our starting lineup do. For example, the Timberwolves, they could kind of go like Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert, and that's like a functioning competitive elite lineup while two of our four best players are on the bench. I feel like the Hawks could do they could try lineups where it's Murray and Collins, Trae Young and Okwangwu, that kind of thing. So that's another reason I like them. But obviously, when I say I like them, I mean their chances at winning games. Screw the Hawks. I hate them. But it's your number 10 pick.
Okay, so my number 10 pick is this one was interesting, but looking at the remainder of the teams that are left, and also the fact that the Hornets were the 10 seed last year, and I don't think they're going to be anywhere near that. I apologize for the slander, but I'm going to go with the New York Knicks here. I think this is obviously, I think N.B.A. people are praying, the N.B.A. Office is probably praying for this just because the Knicks in the playoffs is such a big draw for the league. But this is a team that struggled last year. There were a lot of question marks, only 37 wins, so many issues. But at the same time, the year before, they had a great season and just got eliminated by the Atlanta Hawks we just talked about. The main addition here is Jalen Brunson. Gives them a true point guard, a guy who hopefully is going to play 82 or close to 82 games at point guard for them, which I think is absolutely huge. It was their biggest weakness last year. It's been their biggest weakness for a while. Derrick Rose is very good in that bench role, but at starter, Elfrid Payton is just not the move. Kemba Walker had some intrigue, but it just unfortunately didn't end up working out for him.
Wait. I'm sorry to cut you off here. That was the biggest understatement I've ever heard. Elfrid Payton as the starting point guard is not the move.
Yeah, it's not the move considering I don't even know if he's on an NBA roster.
He's with y'all.
No, he's not.
Y'all cut him?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he was god awful for us.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Yep, he is not. The top Google search when you search up Elfrid Payton is, does Elfrid Payton still play basketball? So, let's get off the shitting on Elfrid Payton's side of the podcast. Jalen Brunson is a major upgrade at point guard. Derrick Rose is still on the bench, which is good for them. They still have Emmanuel Quickly, who's, probably more of a combo guy than a true point guard, but he is a good piece off the bench. He can score quite a bit. I like the upside of Miles McBride. I think he can be a quality piece on a contending team. Quentin Grimes as well. I liked what I saw from him in small sample sizes. RJ Barrett is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously. In my opinion, I think he's the best player on this team, and I really hope he takes another step forward this year. I thought he was really good last year, and I think with his talent, he can really be the figurehead of this team. Evan Fournier, I think everybody's talked about it. I just don't know why they signed him. It doesn't really make much sense. But he is a solid enough NBA player. He can shoot most of the time. He plays solid enough defense. It's just one of those things. He's just kind of there. I hope it works out for them. My main thing I would really think about is putting Cam Reddish at the 3 and Barrett at the 2. Of course, that is the question mark. Cam Reddish, how much can he contribute to this team? Because if he does, I think it raises their ceiling quite a bit. I think the 2-3 of Barrett Reddish, if both are performing, is really, really intriguing. 2 young players that played together. I just think it makes too much sense. Obi Toppin, Julius Randle at the 4. That's a big talking point. Of course, the stats, a lot of people said that the Knicks played better with Obi Toppin than Julius Randle. But this team, I think, only goes as far as Julius Randle can not necessarily carry them, but as long as he's contributing. Julius Randle was a big reason of why the Knicks were so good 2 years ago. I think he's going to improve with a better supporting cast. And then Mitchell Robinson's still at the 5. They lost Nerlens Noel, which sucks for them, but they still have Jericho Sims, and then one of my favorite ads of the entire offseason, Isaiah Hartenstein, who I think is a super underrated player. I think he'll be a perfect backup 5. I wouldn't even be surprised if he ends up starting at some point because I just really love him as a player. So I just have way more confidence in the Knicks and the talent they have than any of the remaining teams that are going to be underneath them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. They were my next pick. I will say on Randall, we've talked about him a lot. He's been one of our favorite players over the years. And I'm not gonna overrate preseason, but going from last year into how his preseason's looking, it's not looking great. But like I said, not gonna overrate preseason, but I do like the idea of just getting the baggage out the door if they could get his value up a little bit, and Obi Toppin kind of gives them that run up and down the floor power forward that could catch really good passes from Brunson and kind of stop clogging up the offense for RJ and others. So yeah, I hope I'm wrong there. Just kind of what I'm feeling in my gut. But I guess the bottom 5 teams we probably won't have to spend as much time with. I got the Wizards just because, not because I like them, just because I think they have enough talent to be 11. That's why. Anything you got to say about the Wizards?
I mean, it's I don't really know.
I just don't care about the Wizards.
Yeah, they won 35 games last year. They were behind the Knicks and the Hornets. I think that's the intrigue for this bottom five, is seeing where the Hornets end up.
On
Who
my
picks
list
them
or just
first?
in general?
Just in general, just to see
Okay.
which one of us picks them first. I mean, the Wizards, they still have Bradley Beal if he actually plays. Monty Morris is cool. Will Barton is cool. I mean, you're just like, yeah, it's cool. I mean, they have Porzingis, they have Kuzma, but like, I don't. It's like one of those teams, the Wizards. If you're picking your league pass teams, they don't come anywhere near any league pass group of teams I would pick. I'm sorry. So
No, absolutely not. They're like the definite. It's crazy. This is coming from a Hornets fan, but the Wizards are just like the definition of mediocrity, especially after they signed that Beal contract. You know, I hated that contract for, well, not
yeah,
for Beal, for the Wizards.
they just have like that. They're going to get the 12th, the 14th pick in the NBA draft. Like that, they just have that all about them. They have no chance of the playoffs, but they have no chance of being bad enough to actually get a good pick, which sucks for them.
So I'm gonna guess your next pick.
Go for it.
It's gonna be the Pistons.
Yep, you would be
Okay.
correct. Thankfully, there's a little bit more talking points.
Yeah.
I'll keep it brief, just because, of course, we're down to more of the teams that I don't think the Pistons have a chance to make the play in unless the Knicks completely implode. And I still think I think their ceiling is above the Wizards. I just don't think they're necessarily going to reach that. But of course, Cade, Jaden Ivey, that's the main thing. I can't wait to watch the two of them play together. They add some good depth. Kemba Walker. They still have Killian Hayes. Alec Burks is a nice little addition. I love Sadiq Bey so much. He's so good. He was in the top 10 of my players that I like the most in the league, obviously. Bojan Bogdanovic is a really good pickup for them. I just have some question marks. I think, I think they have good depth. It's just a matter of the quality of their five just isn't necessarily as good as like the Knicks, I think. So that's why I have them here. But they're definitely going to be a fun team to watch. Talk about the Wizards not being a league pass team. The Pistons are 100% a league pass team for me. So
The Pistons, in terms of league pass rankings, feel like how people felt about us last year. It's like, ooh, fun, young, and up and coming team, the top point guard prospect from last year, mixed with a bunch of fun run and gun talent. But the Pistons actually have more of a competent roster. Yeah, everyone who's heard me on here knows I'm hyped for the Pistons, so I'm not gonna dispute anything you said. And with that, I have the Magic, because I'm actually, even though I have them 13th, I'm still like decently high on the Magic, even though the lineups they're treading out so far are ridiculous. Maybe they are trying to tank again, or maybe it's just because they've never been able to construct a roster that consisted of players that slotted into natural positions. It's ironic I'm saying that because I was just praising the Raptors, but the difference is the Raptors gets tall guys who could shoot, dribble, pass. The Magic, a lot of the time, get tall guys who can't do much of those things, and I don't know. That's why they're still obviously so low on the rankings, but I think they'll win enough games to not be the worst team.
yeah, I agree. I don't have them as the worst team in the East. I think it's another team got a lot of intrigue. Obviously, it's going to be good just to see Paolo Banchero, how he fits in this offense next to Franz, next to Cole Anthony, next to Jalen Suggs. Obviously, it sucks for them. Gary Harris going to miss probably most of the season, if not all of the season, which is a shame. Jonathan Isaac is back, which is cool. Obviously, his defensive ability, if he's still capable of that, will be intriguing. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of his minutes. It's possible you even see him next to Banchero if they want to go with this large, like the Cavs did last year with a large lineup. There's just a lot more intrigue here than the teams that are going to be below them. I actually had them 14th. I had a team above them, which may surprise you a bit, but I think it will be close for them. But yeah, they're going to be at the bottom of the East again. But I think they're on the way up.
So who's your 14 then? Lay it down.
It's going to be the Charlotte Hornets.
Ah!
They will not be in the cellar. As great as that sounds or not, I don't really know if that's a compliment or not. This is a team that obviously made the play-in last year. They were very solid last year. The main thing is they have a big hole, not necessarily a big hole at the 4, but a big hole in terms of interior scoring. We all know why that's the case. PJ Washington's going to be starting at the 4, which I think is great. I think we all love PJ. We're really excited to see him get another chance in the starting lineup or consistently be in the starting lineup. LaMelo Ball is still at the 1. It's going to be great to watch him again. The rest of it, I mean, we're Terry Rozier fans, but you kind of know what you're going to get from him at this point. Maybe some James Bouknight high minutes this year. I don't really know. We haven't been too impressed with preseason, but it's kind of like that. Gordon Hayward is back, which is, I guess, exciting. Kelly Oubre is back. Kelly Oubre is exciting to watch, not necessarily for the right reasons, but
don't get me wrong, I still love Kelly. It's just he doesn't contribute to us winning.
Yeah. Cody Martin got paid. I think that's very exciting. Yeah. And then, of course, you have the long men, Jalen McDaniels, JT Thor, Kai Jones, the freaking lanky wings or centers or whatever you want to call them. I really hope Mark Williams gets minutes to actually prove himself. Plum Dog's still at the 5.
Yep.
I know you're thrilled by that. I just think they're going to be better than the Pacers. I just think LaMelo is just going to drag them over the Pacers. He's just going to win enough games. But I really hope that y'all beat the Pacers in terms of standings and still get the number 1 pick and get Wembanyama. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I haven't talked about my own team much on my own podcast, but it's because it just hurts too much. But yeah, I mean, I would have them above the Pacers if the Pacers made some trades. Personally, I'm not seeing it. Besides that, we're just so whack. I think that's the first time I've used whack on this podcast. Just our depth is just so weak sauce. I'm not even talking about. Usually, when teams talk about depth, you're talking about the bench. I'm talking about after LaMelo, I guess Hayward, Terry. I don't know, because I'm a big PJ fan and Cody Martin fan, but they're so inconsistent on offense in general. Where I'm trying to look at it as how many wins are there going to be, not how much I like this player. And maybe I'm just coping for the Wembanyama or something. But I've been on this for a while, ever since our off-season disasters. I've maintained that I thought we were going to be one of the worst teams, and I feel like that sentiment is just now starting to be more popular as we're starting to see preseason teams,
Yeah, I think to me it's obvious that they would probably be closer to 11 or 12 if the fat bastard at the 4 hadn't screwed up. But without him and his scoring on the interior, I just don't think there's much.
But hey, if we get one of those top prospects next year, it's a blessing in disguise. Because as much as I liked him as a player and all that jazz, he wasn't a top whatever player. He wasn't that top whatever you need to be one of those teams. So if we could get one of those guys, so be it. And that leaves the Pacers, who we don't need to talk much about. I actually do kind of like some of their players, though, like Mathurin, Duarte, Halliburton. I saw Halliburton was favored in some places for MIP, I guess just because they assume he's going to shoot a million times or something. I mean, there's not much to watch out for on this team. I'll watch them if they're playing someone else I like and go like, oh, it's Halliburton. But yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I think they still have enough. Like their top 5 is well-rounded enough on offense and defense. That's the only reason I have them as one spot above the Hornets. But I mean, what is there to even say about this team, Patrick?
I mean, I'm excited to watch Jalen Smith. It sounds like he's going to start at the 4.
Yeah,
I'm excited. I'm excited for that. Aaron
That's
Nesmith might get a chance, which is probably less exciting. I don't really have much high hopes there.
That Charleston boy.
Yeah, That is for sure. Benedict Mathurin, I like watching him in college, so I really hope he gets a chance to shine at a high level.
You think he's going to
Uh,
be really good for them? Like, what do you think he's going to be a good fit with
eh,
Halliburton or?
I don't. I think he might. I think it's actually not a bad fit considering it depends how much defense he plays, which I think he's capable of. I think it's one of those things that may be a rough first 2 years. Not necessarily rough, and I just think his efficiency isn't going to be the best. But I think he'll grow as a player. So it's a question mark. But he's exciting. He's certainly one of the few exciting players on this team. Um, James Johnson is on this team, so they're guaranteed at least one or two brawls throughout the season, which is usually fun to watch. Miles Turner is still here. I imagine he's probably going to be getting traded, which is part of why I have them in the cellar. He's probably their best player, maybe second best player behind Halliburton. TJ McConnell is here too. I kind of love the Suns came and picked him up to be the backup point guard. I ain't gonna lie. So
That would
we'll
be
see.
a good move. I would like that.
Yep, but that pretty much wraps up the East. It kind of gets depressing once you get to the cellar.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie.